It's Miss C, your favorite global teacher, here with another recap. This is just a super quick disclaimer. These are not my opinions. This is not how I feel. These are the topics that you need to know in order to pass the New York State Global History Regents. Today's topic is a really important topic on the Regents, the French Revolution. It is really the first revolution within the age of revolutions that is usually taught. And the Regents, I can guarantee you $100, the Regents is asking about the French Revolution. So let's talk about historical circumstances. Well, King Louis is the absolute monarch in France, and we know absolute monarchs hold what? 100% power over the people, and he does claim divine right, obviously. And King Louis, because he has full control, he does a couple of things that piss the third estate off. Let's talk about the estate system or social classes inside of France. So there are three social classes in France that are called the estates. Estates are social classes in France, which is cool because if the question is asking about estates, you automatically know it's French Revolution because that's the only time where social classes are called estates. So in the first estate or social class is the church, the popes, the clergy, the priests, anybody associated with the church. The second social class are the nobles. Remember, absolute monarchs control their nobles because they think that the nobles may rebel. So King Louis forced his nobles to live in the castle with him. And the third estate. Now we have to be careful with how we describe the third estate. Although it is the last social class, it is not just peasants. It's 98% of the population. You have business owners, very rich, wealthy merchants. You have doctors, lawyers, down to merchants, farmers, down to peasants and your lower class. But it made up 98% of the population. The third estate was forced to pay 100% of the taxes. And the tax money was used to fund King Louis's lifestyle, to fund Marie Antoinette, his wife, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, to build the Versailles Palace, to fund wars like the American Revolution, actually. And the third estate never benefited from anything, but they were taxed 100%. And King Louis wakes up one day and checks his bank account. Man in the negatives. He spent all of the money and he is going broke. So he calls for a meeting called the Estates General, where all of the social classes are invited to talk about France's financial issues, aka King Louis broke and he need more tax money. So he wanted to do a vote to see who should pay more taxes, and each estate got to vote. The issue with the voting at the Estates General was that it went in a state order. So the first estate went first and they voted for the third estate to pay more taxes. The second estate went second, voted for the third estate to pay more taxes. By the time it got to the third estate to vote, their vote didn't matter. They had already been outvoted. So their voices were not heard, and now they're paying even more taxes. So the third estate walks out of the Estates General because they felt highly disrespected. And at this point, King Louis is like, telling the guards that you have to stop the third estate. And the third estate is like, no, we're leaving. So they pull up to the closest place that they could lock themselves in, and that's King Louis's tennis court. And they take something called the tennis court oath. An oath is a promise, and the third estate promises to keep meeting until they make a new constitution, because at that moment they know King Louis doesn't care. No matter what they say, King Louis is not listening to them, and they want to formally break away from King Louis and start their own government. Now, obviously, enlightenment. There's a document that the Third Estate creates called the Declaration of the Rights of Man. And the rights of man, they outline different rights that they believe people should have, different freedoms that King Louis is limiting. And this document is going to heavily influence the Constitution that they create. For example, well, the Third Estate was taxed 100%. So, in the Constitution, they're going to have equal taxation. All social classes will have to pay taxes. And they will obviously give themselves more rights. But more importantly, they are not going to have an absolute monarch anymore. The Constitution is going to limit or decrease King Louis's power, and they are going to gain power. Now, at this point, the Third Estate, they renamed themselves the National Assembly, and they formally break away from King Louis. And of course, the National Assembly presents the Constitution to King Louis. Like, these are the changes that we want. And let's take a little guess. Do we think King Louis is going to accept or reject the Constitution? Take a second. Think about it. He's going to say, hell no. Obviously, his power is going to be limited. So he is not going to respect the National Assembly. He is not respecting the Constitution. And at this point, the people are tired. It's like they pay 100% taxes. They get outvoted at the Estates General. They have to pay more taxes. They still don't have any rights because he rejects the Constitution. You know that moment when you're tired of talking to somebody and telling them the same thing over and over and over again, that you want to kind of like tussle a little bit? That's where the Third Estate is at. They're done talking to King Louis. They know it's not working. It's time to get physical. So in the event known as storming the Bastille is a prison. In the basement of the prison is an armory. That is where King Louis and the army kept many weapons. So the Third Estate break into the Bastille, take weapons, and free the prisoners. Now, why would he free the prisoners, right? You got to think about why the prisoners are in there. There were no laws. King Louis would just point you out and be like, arrest him, no questions asked. So many of the prisoners that were in Bastille were there because of King Louis, and they had this vengeance against King Louis. So it's kind of like adding little demons to your team to help you go against a shared enemy. And this is really when the reign of terror starts. Now, let's say you freeze on the regions. You're like, damn, the reign of terror. I really don't know what that is. You know what terror is. You know what terror is, and I don't know about you, but I don't like to feel terror. Terror is when you're afraid. So it's like, do you want to live during the reign of terror? No, sounds chaotic. I don't know what it is, but it sounds like I need to stay in my house, lock my door, and not go outside. And that's exactly what people needed to do. The Reign of Terror was led by Robespierre. He's a very radical leader. He's very extreme. Today we will call him a crash out, like any means necessary. And his gang or his like little crew is called the Jacobins. So Robespierre and the Jacobins, they kind of like take over the government and lead the Reign of Terror. Now the issue with Robespierre is that he was very like manic. Like anybody he thought of, suspected of supporting King Louis was dead. Now, if you're suspected of something, you don't need proof. So 3,000, this was in a 10-month time period, 3,000 people from different social classes, the majority came from the Third Estate, died during the Reign of Terror. And this is when the new innovation of the guillotine is created. The guillotine was supposed to be a more humane way to kill somebody by just chopping off the head. And it's Wednesday Addams' like favorite toy. I'm sure like you've seen, if you've seen the Addams Family, you know what I'm talking about. But King Louis and Marie Antoinette, they were taken under house arrest actually, and then they were sent to the guillotine. And so King Louis and Marie Antoinette dead. And then Robespierre was just too radical. Like he was too much of a crash out. The people were like, why are we letting him lead us? So the people sent Robespierre to the guillotine. So now everybody dead. Everybody dead. France doesn't have a leader. They accomplished their goal. in killing King Louis, but now it's like, what does government look like? Now, let's think about it. Do you think the French people are going to want one leader or shared power amongst a group of people? Let's think about it. Well, they're not going to want one leader. They were just traumatized by King Louis. So they try to do a more shared power, like a group of people ruling, called the Directory. It was a group of 5 men. Now, I always like to ask this question to my students, like, think of you and 4 of your friends being in charge of government. I don't know about you, but me and my friends can't be in charge of the government, okay? We are not going to agree. And if the government cannot agree and they're not making any changes and they are ineffective, then what is the purpose? So the Directory, ineffective, and the French are looking for a new leader. And if we learn anything throughout the French Revolution, the French are not going to be satisfied with just any form of government. If they took King Louis out, then they'll take the Directory out. And so they're looking for someone to lead the country. You got to think about, like, okay, what type of person would you want leading your country? Somebody who's strong, right? Somebody who the people could trust, somebody that the people could be proud of, somebody that will create a sense of nationalism inside of the French people, a love for your country. And there is a man named Napoleon. He is a military general. He is a war hero. Through the Napoleonic Wars, France doubles in size, gained so much lands, went into Prussia, went into Rhine, that's Germany, went into Spain. Just the French Empire was the largest under Napoleon, and the people loved him. And Napoleon led a coup. That's when a military general takes over the government or overthrows the government. So Napoleon led a coup, an overthrow of the Directory, because the Directory was ineffective. He crowns himself emperor and claims divine right. And we got to think about, why would he crown himself emperor and why would he claim divine right? Well, there's a couple of different reasons, but it's the idea that, Napoleon conquered a lot of land that didn't go through rebellions yet, okay? People that have not overthrown their leader, people that are used to the tradition of an absolute monarch. So Napoleon thought it was important to legitimize his power by going the traditional route, because the empires within France now were still traditional empires. They didn't go through revolutions anymore, they didn't go through revolutions yet. Now, Napoleon, he's known for the Napoleonic Code. These are a set of laws which promoted equality. Lots of Enlightenment ideas. Like, Napoleon did a lot of Enlightenment ideas. Napoleon fell short because he tried to conquer too much. And he met his match against Britain in the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon, he loses this very famous battle and is captured by the British. And the British exile Napoleon to an island. Funny enough, Napoleon escapes. They have to put him on a different island, St. Helene, and that is where he dies from a stomach ulcer. And that is the end of the Napoleonic era. Now, obviously, the biggest impact the French Revolution had is the example that it set for other countries, other people who are unhappy with their cruel leaders, to do a rebellion, do a revolution. We're going to see the Haitian Revolution. We're going to see Latin American revolutions. We're going to see just a burst of revolutions all around the world. People who feel like their leaders are being unjust, they're going to go against them. They're going to overthrow their leaders. Now, if we're talking about enduring issues, there are just so many that we could attach to it, right? Now, just the estates system, the historical circumstance, right, that led to the French Revolution, the unfair estate system, the unfair taxation against the third estate, that's inequity. 100%, the third estate is not being treated equal. King Louis has a desire for power by controlling his people. with 100%, you know, control. The people have no rights. He controls his nobles, you know what I'm saying? And then when we're moving into like the Constitution, the new Constitution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, that's 100% impacted by ideas and beliefs. The idea that people feel like they deserve freedom, they deserve rights. They no longer want an absolute monarch that controls absolutely everything. And then obviously the revolution itself is modernization versus tradition. The people are not going to be satisfied with the traditional idea of an absolute monarch. They want a more modern form of government. Okay, so if we're looking at multiple choice, 9 times out of 10, it will have something to do with the estate system. I've seen so many different multiple choice questions illustrating the estates in this manner in some type of way. So we see how, and it's kind of, you know, Regent's images are hard because they're in black and white, but if we look at towards the bottom of the image, we see the third estate just holding up the first and second estate. And that's usually, if it's going to be an estates question, it's going to be the third estate holding up the first and second estate. Now that's symbolic. Remember, the third estate paid all the what? The taxes, which is being used for the clergy and the nobles. It's supporting the nobles' lifestyle. It's paying off the church. So the third estate is often illustrated as like struggling, like shirtless, you know, weak, looking like they need to eat. It's symbolic of how King Louis was just like taking everything from them. And if we're looking at the multiple choice questions, the first one is asking, well, what is true based on this image? What is a true statement? And it's obvious that the third estate was supporting the first and second estate. And you could clearly see that in the image. Now, the second question, what is an effect of the estate system? Well, it's obviously going to be that the king is beheaded, right? Let's say you don't know what a republic is. But a republic is when there's like more of a shared power. But let's say you don't know that, right? You know that King Louis got beheaded. You know what I'm saying? You know that's going to be your answer. This excerpt of the Declaration of the Rights of Man, right? Well, let's say you freeze and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the rights of man. So obviously people are going to feel like they deserve rights. And that should signify anything to do with like rights goes back to Enlightenment, goes back to the French Revolution, for real. So for this first question, well, who would support it? The third estate. It's a third estate document also, but it's like, who's fighting for rights up in here? It's the third estate. So that's going to be your answer. The second question, what claim is true based on the document? A claim is an argument. So which one of these is true to the document? Well, obviously it's the idea that people deserve rights and to be treated fairly. Document, the storming of the Bastille. And it's a historical circumstance question. The first question in all the short answers is always a historical circumstance question. And remember, that's cause is what led to the storming of the Bastille. There's a couple of things that you can say, you know. One option you could say is the historical circumstance leading to the storming of the Bastille is King Louis rejecting the new constitution because King Louis didn't want his power to decrease and he didn't want to give the people rights. And obviously, the Constitution decreased King Louis's power and increased the people's power. So of course he's going to reject it. You could say that. You can also just say like the unfair taxation of the third estate. The third estate was tired of their voices not being heard, especially at the Estates General, and for their taxes to be increasing. And if we're looking at this other historical circumstance question, notice how the estates are being illustrated. Look at the first and second estate on top of the third estate. The third estate is in chains, barely clothed, looking hungry because King Louis is taking from them, taking the taxes. They're being taxed 100%. And if we're looking at the answer to this question, the historical circumstances leading to the unfair estate system, you could say King Louis's absolute power because he is able to control who pays taxes and who does not. You know, something about the creation of the estate system. Thank you for slaying global with me. Bye.